the Animal Vaccinations Podcast.
Our podcast sharing conversations with veterinary students, professionals, and people working across animal-related fields.
Our goal is simple: to educate, inspire, and diversify the veterinary profession.
Today, we're joined by Azeemah Parker to talk about her journey as a lecturer in veterinary public health.
So let's get into it.
Welcome to the podcast, Azeemah. I hope you're having a lovely day.
Thank you for having me. I'm very, very, very happy to be here.
So to start off, could you please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your current role?
So I am Azeemah Parker. I am a lecturer in veterinary public health and state veterinary medicine at Harper and Kiel Vet School. And at the moment, what I do is I am the module lead for the third year veterinary public health and state veterinary medicine module, and I lead the final year rotations. And I do a bit of fourth year teaching in between.
That's amazing. We just wanted to start it off by asking you what inspired you to pursue veterinary medicine.
I think ever since I could say the word vet, I wanted to be one. And I think a lot of vet students or vets, we start off just loving animals and wanting to be with them. And I think now I realize a lot of it was neurodivergence, but I preferred to be with people with animals rather than with people. A lot more peaceful, a lot more, felt more understood. And I thought that's probably why I wanted to do that. I also I enjoyed science. I was a bit of a nerd there, and those two worked well together. And I made the mistake of thinking, well, I don't like people that much. Let's be a vet. No, that was probably the biggest mistake or the misinterpretation that I had. But that's why I wanted to do veterinary medicine initially. Yeah.
What was your journey like to vet school?
So I'm from South Africa, and in South Africa there is only one vet school, which is the University of Pretoria's Faculty of Veterinary Science. Very, very competitive to get in. At the time when I was doing it, there was only 137 that they would select per year in the country to get into it. And also at the time, it was a 7-year degree. So now it's 6. Very, very intensive, long. But getting in was actually the easy part. Getting out was harder. So I had to apply, and then you do your first 2 years, and after 2 years you get selected to continue the course. If not, you have to complete another BSc or something like that. And I didn't get in the first time after I had, started my first year, because I'd actually failed first year. There's this saying that first year sometimes is the best 2 years of your life, and that was maybe certainly true for me. And then eventually, got in after repeating my first year, some modules. So I got in second year, and it was really, really a great experience studying in South Africa. It's it is world renowned for the work that is done there. So we have a full hospital on site. I got to do some work in the Kruger National Park for wildlife rotations. A lot of the patients that I had was wildlife, especially baby rhinos whose mothers had been poached, that kind of stuff, and very, very broad exposure to species and people. So I think that was very, very, I'm fortunate to have had that experience, to have studied in South Africa.
It's amazing. I think I just wanted to say, first of all, doing all this wildlife work and Kruger, everything's literally my dream life. But also, were there any specific challenges or defining moments that really shaped your path?
I think in high school, I got away with doing really well and didn't have to do much to just do very well. And like I said, I didn't pass first year the first time round, and it's because university is completely different. And it doesn't actually matter how well you did in school. It's a very, very different type of situation and a huge adjustment. And interestingly enough, my mom and I had started university at the same time. So she's the first in her family. So she did initially go to university when she had finished high school, but her family couldn't afford for her to continue to do it. And there's also very limited opportunities for people to study that time, especially people of color, because of apartheid. And so the challenges were being, nobody else really having gone to university. My mom was studying her law degree, so it wasn't as if there was anything to discuss there. So that was very different. Also, I moved to a city that was 2,000 kilometers away from home. My parents didn't leave. And it was a huge adjustment from coming from a really strict household to suddenly having all of this freedom and then trying to pass. It was a really, it was an interesting time, and then also just being exposed to so many different things. The city where I'm from is very different. I'm from Cape Town, and that was all just a huge adjustment. And then the academics itself, I went undiagnosed with ADHD for a very long time. I only got diagnosed in my 30s. I couldn't understand why some things came so much easier to other people. Retrospectively, how I didn't know that was what was the case was actually insane. That was probably, there was many challenges, but I would say that was probably the few that stood out, and at least in my first 3 years.
Yeah, and on that note, did you have anyone that we could look up to during vet school?
So there was one person, and he was from my community. And again, in South Africa, what was difficult is because of apartheid, people of color weren't allowed to go and study at most tertiary institutions, and very few were selected to go and do that. So at the time, there was a very small amount of people that could study at a different faculty where they could study veterinary science. But so they were still taught by the same people and used the same practical facilities, but they were segregated. And one of the people that had actually graduated from that cohort, he was working at the PDSA. And since I was maybe started high school, and up until I was even studying, I would go and volunteer at the PDSA, and I had him to look up to. And his name is Ayub, and he does a lot of work for of color in South Africa. And another person I looked up to immensely, she actually recently passed 2 years ago, was Dr. Thereshni Chetty. She was an equine specialist, and she started the Black Vets Association of South Africa, which is for all vets of color, and gave us a sense of belonging and allowed us to feel supported and have more access to those things. And also being an equine specialist and one of the most renowned in the country, huge for a woman of color, for an Indian woman. And it was I looked up to her a lot. And so I had those two people, but other than that, there wasn't much. And I think that leads to some of the other challenges. Was having gone to vet school, I was maybe one of 6 people of color in my class. I think, yeah. And then of that, if you think of South Africa, it's a majority Black country. There were only about 3 or 4 Black students in our class. So it was difficult in that sense, the isolation, and retrospectively looking at it, the discrimination that you didn't even realize was there. But I wouldn't say that it was a huge factor at the time. I wasn't thinking about that. But also, a lot of the time, you just sort of brush it off because you're so used to things.
I think on continuing from that about like the microaggression and like not realizing when it actually happens, why do you think representation and visibility and visible role models are important in veterinary medicine? Now, looking back at it a few years later.
So you mentioned that you like wildlife, and in South Africa, it's a very white male dominated thing, and it's very difficult to try and get into if you are interested in that. And those kinds of things need to change. Even with farm practice, that I've noticed here in the UK is, firstly, you don't have that exposure and you're not feeling very welcome in a certain place, you are not going to maybe want to do that. And that's why I was saying my role models, for example, was Thereshni. She was an equine specialist. I still am really not into horses, but for students that are, I mean, there is somebody that can do that, because if you look at equine medicine or horses in general, that's usually a type of class that we weren't exposed to, or at least I wasn't, and hard to get into or to feel like you do belong. So it really does matter. And then with what I teach, public health, I mean, it's something that I definitely, as a vet student myself, would never have been interested in. And now I think what matters is me being there and teaching it. It's, if I can, inspire a few students to want to do that, because, hey, she looks like me, she talks like I do similar background. She's different, but she's doing something different as well. I think I would hope that people would see that their opportunities are absolutely endless.
And that incredible note, over the span of your career, have you seen any changes in terms of diversity and representation in the profession?
Yes, I definitely have. And I think it comes to giving people those opportunities and believing in people. When I say believing, I don't mean blind belief, but it's that equity versus equality situation and affording people the opportunity to get to that same level. I was fortunate enough to get a government bursary to have my studies paid for because my parents would not have been able to afford that. And with that, I was given a job in government. So I ended up in public health because that was the job that was available, and it was a government job, which was amazing. And again, working for a Department of Agriculture that was historically white, male, Afrikaans dominated, and that was the law. So coming into those spaces, it was really good, and I was given opportunities that I took every opportunity and I ran with it. And as a woman, firstly, and then secondly, as a person of color and having neurodivergence is that imposter syndrome. So you often think like, am I here because of affirmative action or am I here because I deserve to be here? You know, whether it's true or not, and it isn't, but even if it is, you are there. So do something with it. And what I did when I was working for the Department of Agriculture was open doors to trade with certain countries that weren't there, collaboration with different organizations within government. So even though South Africa is a secular country, the Western Cape province where I was a state vet in, majority of their meat was slaughtered halal. And so the halal trade was something that we had never really thought to look into. And it was something that was then started by myself and my other team members to go on trade missions to invite countries from the Middle East over and start sort of talks about trading halal meat and that kind of thing. So using that and also using the background that I had, grew up with those kind of things and I understood those things. Bring your talents forward with whatever it is that you want to do.
That is so inspiring. Thank you. We also want to know what more you think needs to be done in terms of like representation and diversity, both in South Africa and here in the UK.
What I've noticed here, and I think in the UK, it's very different in the sense that over here, students of color, and forgive me if I don't know what the correct terms are, but here you are the minority, whereas in South Africa, we're not, is that I don't want to say that don't brush off the microaggressions, don't brush off the feeling of otherness. Embrace it, call it out, and find somebody you trust that you can talk to about it. But most importantly, my message is to take up space. Take up space.
I honestly love that. Yeah, because I think
space,
like,
it is your space. Yeah.
I think you're so right because so many students find it so they just get really scared to stand up for themselves firstly and also stand up for everyone else. Even through my 3 years in vet school, I think that's one of the biggest thing I've learned apart from like academically. And yeah, that's like super important. Take up space because it's your space.
Yeah, it's one of those, there's more of a spotlight on you. And if you're a woman as well, and if you have neurodivergence, if you are a minority, you can't put a foot wrong, or that's how you feel. I can't make the same mistakes that a white male peer could. At least that's how I feel. And I think a lot of people will resonate with that. Or if you are very confident and you do take up that space, you're arrogant or you're cocky, that could come across as well. But I would still encourage you to take up that space. It's be willing to learn. And also, I think we've all got this down with you can't take things personally as well. But when it comes to doing the right thing and calling out injustices where you safely can, do it. But when it comes to your career and who you are as a person, take up space. But it comes with time.
Such important advice, and I hope everyone is able to take something away from that. Moving on to your career, if you don't mind us asking, why did you decide to move to the UK? What was that transition like professionally and personally?
Well, I I wasn't in a place where I felt my career was growing. I've always wanted to move abroad. I always wanted to travel and to see the world. I felt that in the direction I want to even take my career into now is, to study further. The UK was the place for me to do so. And when I moved over, two things that stood out was food is awful and the weather even worse. I actually still can't decide what's worse, but I was then an OV in Scotland for a year, and then took this job. And ultimately, what I want to do with public health and One Health as a whole is to really show students and the world as a whole that the importance that and the big role that vets do play when it comes to food safety, when it even comes to things like poverty. And for me, public health is the one field of veterinary science where you can actually change the world. You have the ability to do so. If I think about why I wanted to stay in public health, is I had just started my career as a vet working for the government, and we had the listeriosis outbreak, which to date is still the largest outbreak that happened in the world with listeriosis, and over 200 people died. And the people that died were the poor people in our country, because the food that was contaminated was a cheaper source of protein and the only source of protein some people could afford. And that was purely the fault of poor food safety, hygiene, things that were missed. And had that been in place when it came to ready-to-eat meals of animal origin, that wouldn't have happened. It could have been prevented. And we had to wait for something like that to happen. And I think that's when it really clicked that is important. And if you actually empower younger people and arm them with education, those kinds of things will change. And us as vets, we have a huge role to play in that, because food, environment, mental health, all of that relates. And I think that's why public health is so important to me, because that ties it all together.
What's one misconception that people have about veterinary public health that you've heard the most?
I think a lot of people think, I certainly thought so, that it's just abattoir work. And it's abattoir work and it's a lot of legislation, which it is a lot of legislation. I'm not going to lie there. Abattoir work, paperwork, and it isn't that. I got to travel quite a lot in my career. I got to meet with different counterparts of veterinary science in different countries. I went to, pet food factories in the US. I got to do trade negotiations. I got to assist with writing policy that would change procedure to enhance trade, to enhance food safety. When it comes to One Health and just furthering that kind of thing, it's so wide open, and it's not just working in an abattoir. It is so much broader than that. And my career and what I have done in the past, I'm going to give my age away, 12 years now, has been so much broader than just working in an abattoir.
Yeah. Could you maybe give us an example of how veterinary public health impacts everyday life, especially about policies? Because a lot of students come to get into it and don't really know how.
So, for example, let's say you're going to be a small animal vet. So principles of certification is going to be a thing that you're going to have to do, be it for export owners traveling with their pets. You are going to need to know how to complete certificates. That's a public health thing right there. And then if we stick with small animal practice, there are many, many issues with regard to zoonotic diseases and animal bites and those kind of things that will come in. And if we staying on travel with puppy smuggling and people bringing in animals illegally, things like rabies could become a reality. So very, very important over there is public health over there. And if we think of large animal, farm animal practice, again with zoonotic disease, but what ties in there is a lot of government work. And also, if public health is not protected, or if notifiable disease is not protected, there comes the mental health aspect of farmers. And it's a it's something that is not in isolation to anything else that you're going to do. Any field of veterinary science or veterinary medicine that you're going to go into is going to be affected by public health. The environment as well, and that's not something to think of. I mean, with what we're doing with also antimicrobial resistance, or even just what we're consuming ourselves, what the animals are eating and what we're putting in the environment is going into our bodies. It is not something that can ever be considered in isolation. It is a holistic public One Health situation in every aspect, or wherever or however you're going to be practicing.
That is so true. On kind of that note again, what skills or experiences would you recommend students or new graduates especially should develop if they're interested in public health when they go into the working world?
I would, and I can't say that I would know of any of my colleagues that would not be open to talking, is to reach out. Drop us an email, drop me an email, and ask people and find out what is out there. You don't necessarily need to study further just yet. I am only starting to do that now, and that's been, it's been a very long time. I never intended to become public health. I wasn't studying public health, and this year is when I'm starting to do that formally. And it is, if it is an interest that you are in, if it's something that you're interested in, look into it, talk to people, take whatever opportunities you can get, and be open-minded. Your career is wide open. I wanted to do birds. That was my thing. Exotics, but specifically birds, which I did for a while. But my career just put me in a direction. I never thought I'd be teaching either. And that turned out to be one of the most fulfilling things I've done. It's a lot of pressure as well, but teaching people, educating, I can only create the changes if I'm willing to put the knowledge out there and to learn myself. So is to really never stop questioning things and to never stop learning. On that note, with your career in public health, I've mentioned some of the things I've done, but when it comes to World Organization for Animal Health, WOHA, Food and Agriculture Organization, and even the WHO, United Nations organizations, when it comes to public health, if as many children of immigrants, if you speak more than one language, you already are at an advantage. And, they've got many public health jobs that pay really, really well. And there you get to really do the change. It's wide open. Be open-minded and speak to people.
That's honestly really inspiring. Looking back, is there any advice you wish someone had given you when you were a student?
I think the advice I would have liked to get was, I don't know, there's a lot of things that I probably wish I would have got. If I think back now, even if I had gotten the advice I needed about this degree, about this course, about everything that comes with it, I would not have changed my decision to become a vet. And I think that says it all. So what I actually would say is I wish that I had had the support in place for me, because I wouldn't have chosen differently. And I think a lot of us that want to be vets, that's what we want to do. Because let's be serious, if you've got the brain to be a vet, you've got the brain to be super rich and do something else that's less dangerous and less time consuming and pays better. But we chose this career path. So you wouldn't have convinced me otherwise, even if you told me what is going to be placed in front of me and the challenges that I would get. So I think I'd rather say that I wish that there was more support in place. The type of support that, I'm trying to cultivate now for students.
That is amazing. And what keeps you motivated after all these years to study more and do more and teach more?
I wanted to say that trauma of having brown parents and want you to know it's not, but partly. It's more finding other things that bring you joy now. And I think the first part is actually recognizing you've got this, even if you don't feel that way, and working on that part of it. But then also your identity is not being a vet, and it isn't only your career, it's having something outside of it. And for me, that's writing poetry and writing books in general. So finally I'm a published poet officially after years of trying submissions like that. So I have joy, I find joy in writing. And I also now within my career have things that are fulfilling. So with regard to studying further and teaching and doing this podcast, for example, doing focus groups with EDI at our vet school on how to help students of ethnic minorities and stuff like that, is to find ways to make your job meaningful for you as well. So that when someone like me with ADHD, when I have to do all of that admin and write emails and do the things I don't want to do, there's a large part of my job that I do enjoy, but also have something separate out of all of it. Also, find yourself some non-vet friends. Very important. Non-vet friends.
A lot of us forget that it's very important to have non-vet friends and keep veterinary medicine away from being your only personality at the store.
Yeah. And do not describe the food you're eating as looking like pathology to your non-vet friends. Don't do it.
Got it.
So yeah, looking into representation further, what advice would you give students from underrepresented backgrounds who are considering a career in veterinary medicine?
If it's something that you want to do, don't let anyone deter you. Funnily enough, for me, it wasn't, everyone else that was more of a deterrent rather than my own community. So I found the challenge with doing veterinary medicine had come from my own community, and it was real doctor or, engineer, accountant, or whatever else you're supposed to be. And also with my family being Muslim, they were, not my parents, though, they were very, very supportive and amazing. But, it was like, oh, dogs, pigs. I'm like, get over yourself. That's not even how it works. So, I find that a lot of it comes from that. And then there's also the comments that I still get today, is things like that, snarky comments from your own community. And I think that's still the challenge that I find. But it's not a challenge anymore. I just don't care. But that comes with age as well. You stop caring what people think about you, and you actually care what you think about yourself. And that's what's most important.
That's amazing, because I think I resonated with literally more than 90% of everything you've said until now. And on that note, again, like, even I'm kind of like battling my diagnosis of ADHD now, and about the imposter syndrome you said, and the emails, and basically thinking I want a life away from away from humans and only animals, as well, is what kind of brought me here, like, principally. So I wanted to ask, with your ADHD and everything, what are some benefits that you found, and what are some disadvantages you realized that it gave you?
The disadvantage is always, and sometimes still struggling with, is really being exceptionally hard on myself. Why can't I just be like, why can't I just do that? I now need to do this. I need to do everything. And I've only at this age, I end up getting an ADHD coach, because even with meds, there's still, because sometimes my meds will just give me the energy to brush my teeth that day, have a shower, and that's it. And it's learning to work with your brain and not against it. So it's not that you can't be like everyone else, and it's not that you're not as good as everyone else. You do things differently. Your brain works differently. And instead of trying to force it into a mold, start working with your brain. So I will always still find the challenges doing admin, leaving things that I really don't want to do that needs to be done, and then having all of that pressure. But the superpowers with ADHD is, if the building is on fire and there's a crisis, there's no one better that you want on your team. So when it comes to thinking fast, working in emergencies, really finding out a smarter and more effective way to get things done, being innovative, that is ADHD, creative, and being, having a good sense of humor, I find as well helps. But it's hard, but radical self-acceptance is something when you do have neurodivergence that you have to come to terms with. And I say that as someone that's still trying to do that. But as soon as, you actually only care what you think of yourself, and once you are happy with who you are, it really doesn't matter that you don't compare yourself with other people. So there is that, and those challenges will always be there, but learn to work with your brain and not against it. Don't try and make it the way somebody else's does.
That was super helpful. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Finally, if listeners are going to take anything away from the conversation, what would you like it to do?
That, I said the taking up space part, it is your place to be here, and never ever be afraid to do that, to take up that space, to, identify what you want and then take those opportunities. And at the same time, also be open-minded to whatever comes your way. Don't immediately say no to something because you haven't tried it. Really try it out. And then you can be like, I don't like that. And another thing when it comes to, I guess, life in general is that on the flip side, if something is not right, no is a complete sentence.
Thank you so much. Before we wrap up, we have a quick rapid fire round, if that's okay with you.
Yeah.
Okay, so teaching or research?
Teaching.
Coffee or tea before a lecture?
Coffee.
Favorite zoonotic disease to teach?
Rabies.
Favorite place you've ever visited?
Ooh. In Oman and Seoul, South Korea.
Nice.
One word your colleagues would use to describe you?
Bird. Wow, it sounds terrible. It's this bird called a hardy-daw from South Africa. It's terrible. They scream and I hate them usually, but maybe I'm homesick. Yeah.
One quality every future vet should have?
Adaptability.
If you weren't a vet, who would you be? What would you be?
I would be, guess I'd be a writer, a poet.
Finally, a really controversial one. Dogs or cats?
Cats.
Okay. That was a very quick answer. Thank you so
Couldn't have
much
been
for
dog.
coming on our podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to the podcast.
To learn more about our Moss patients and the work we do, visit unlostpatients.com.
And don't forget to follow the podcast so you don't miss future episodes.
Educate
Inspire.
and diversify.